questions are from Carolyn Duvall, and her first question is, it's been recommended many times that Akron City Council make their meetings transparent to the public and that video cameras be installed in council chambers. To my knowledge, Mayor Pasquale has squelched that suggestion. Has that happened? If so, will the meetings be televised on local cable TV for all residents of the city of Akron? It is correct that the mayor has been opposed to the cameras. That's personally why that has not happened. But council has voted in favor of the cameras. And we put that in the budget. That kind of tells you something. Okay? And my position on this, and I've changed, I have to tell you, I had originally I was not necessarily in favor of the cameras because they have a tendency to make the meetings really, really long because everybody wants to talk, okay? However, as I've thought about it, it's more important for people to be able to kind of see what's going on without having to necessarily go downtown.
Absolutely.
Channel 15 and public access is alive and well in most of our neighboring communities. Doylestown, Springfield Township, Greene, Hudson, Wadsworth, Youngstown, Cleveland, Warren. And I'm hoping that you will be willing to talk to people that are knowledgeable, myself and others. There is a gentleman named Joe Perkins in Youngstown, and he runs the public access for all of Mahoning and Trumbull County, and has been dying to take over public access for all the rest of Summit County that doesn't have it ever since we were locked out here. And since we started with that, I have 568 signatures here to hand you from people in Akron.
Well, it's real clear. Folks come prepared to these meetings. Okay. Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
I'm a laid-off electrician. I've been laid off since October. Okay. What I'm wondering is, I see a lot of these schools being built, and I see the bridge getting a fence. Michigan people coming in to do that. Other people from other states coming in to build these schools. I want to see Akron people building these schools and building these bridges.
I can tell you, one of the commitments, because I remember going out and to sell the tax increase for the construction of the schools. And that was based on principally two things. One, that Akron residents would be working on those jobs in high proportions. And two, that there would be minority people working on those buildings as well. So basically, we'd be turning these dollars over in our community 2 or 3 times before they go somewhere else. That has not happened. So that needs to change, where particularly companies who are repeat offenders, who are not hiring local people, they need to be denied the contracts. Now, sometimes it's a tough denial because it might mean that the construction on that school stops. But I think it's pretty important to keep your commitments, particularly when the residents, that was the sell, one, okay, we're gonna get local jobs, and I'm gonna get a new school down the street from me, and that's gonna improve my housing value. Even if I don't have kids in school, this is gonna improve my neighborhood.
Akron is very poor about as far as urban agriculture. Now, in Detroit and other cities, they're tearing down all of these buildings, and they're, what kind, would you support that? Would you encourage a plan? The street that I live on right now, we've torn down some streets. I believe there's over 8,000 vacant houses. 14, whatever. There needs to be some sort of cutoff, let's say 2 years, 3 years. If this property is remained vacant, tear it down. people like myself and others who want to use that land to feed ourselves, our neighbors, schools, the community. This is something that can solve a lot of problems, sewer problems, other things like that. That's something that can be looked at relatively cheap. And there are those of us who would rent that land.
Okay.
And I have found out, because I'm trying to purchase some vacant housing next to me to tear down, that the city will, I think it's up to $10,000 to just tear it down. I think that's something that needs to be encouraged, because right now I think there's 10 community gardens in this city that you have to go through this whole process to go through. I think that's a little bit too much, especially we could be encouraging people to use the system for safety.
I'm very prejudiced against my food being under the control of 2 or 3 companies. I don't like that at all. I find that I'm not comfortable with that. And maybe because I watched Soylent Green or some other, I was excited. But I'm not comfortable with that concept. And I'm very much in favor of a locally grown economy where you know who it is. I like being able, if I'm buying something, I can shake your hand and I know a little bit about you and what you do and how you're handling the food there. I'm much more comfortable with that than getting something from, and we see in family farms, everything just being gobbled up in this process. One of the things that I'm going to do is, to go up to Detroit to kind of see what they're doing and get some insight on that thought process. But I'm very supportive of that, and I think it makes a lot of sense for a lot of different reasons. Again, turning that money around in our neighborhood, seeing who is in control of the food, getting fresh food, having fresh food available for areas that may not necessarily have a grocery store or those other things. All of those things are extremely important.
We in Highland Square don't look real good to the rest of the city, because they look at us and they're thinking, in a bad economy, why on earth are they spending all this money to put a grocery store in when these guys can get in their damn cars and drive down to Acme number 1, which is only 2 miles away. Technically, we're in a food desert here. And the reality of the situation is the reason there isn't a grocery store here is because we lost one. And it had to do with the development of Highland Square, which occurred around 2005, 2006, but was planned for between 2000 and 2005. The last planning commission meeting where residents were allowed to participate, I was at that meeting, and we all had our say about why we thought the plan was good or bad. But ultimately, one of the planning commissioners at the very end of the meeting stood up and said, shouldn't one of the conditions for this entire development be that a grocery store gets built? I was sitting behind Steve Albrecht, and when he said that, I watched Steve's head explode. He had absolutely no intention to put a grocery in here, for obvious reasons. The most obvious being he didn't want competition for number 1 down the street. The language in the agreement after that meeting was changed, and very specifically it said Albrecht Inc. would use its best commercial efforts to put a grocery in, which basically let them off the hook. Anybody that read that contract knew exactly what they were doing when they signed it. The mayor signed it, Marco Somerville signed it, Randy Corrigan signed it. I hope you did. Yeah, I did.
He's the only one that said what it was going to be.
Yeah, and while this was going on, while we were in the business association, I was screaming to the city, look, this is a problem. This is not going to work. And what I was told by the city's representative was, you've got parking behind the building, that's all you're going to get, you need to approve this plan. And that's what we as residents got for 5 years of putting our time into trying to make this plan happen. We put our input into it, we took an enormous amount of personal time for nothing, and tried to come to some sort of agreement with the city. Ultimately, it was taken out of our hands. So, the problem here is, I hate to say it, but it's entirely the mayor's menu. And the fact that $3.5 million had to be spent was because he allowed Albrecht Inc. to go ahead and do this, and didn't represent what we had asked him to do.
I think all of us can agree that the agreement that was put together with Albrecht was faulty at its core. To expect a person who is a grocery owner to bring in a competitor down the street from his flagship store, that's just not going to happen. Okay? There was the agreement itself was faulty in that there was an inability to enforce what transpired. The little building that was put on the other side of First Merit over here, as far as I'm concerned, was purposely put there to make the rest of the site undevelopable for a grocery. Okay? And complicates now how you tie that in or whatever to get enough square. It was already too small for most of the models for a grocery store. Now, I've learned a lot about grocery stores. Between the East Akron store and Henry's Acme, I've learned a lot about this business. It's cutthroat, very narrow margins of profit, and it's just difficult to do. That being said, I think the potential for one here is there. But I would say that it would need to be something special about it to attract and draw more than just the Highland Square neighborhood to it in order for it to sustain itself long term. And I think that's part of our objective. Now I remember Trader Joe's was mentioned. Now they're not interested
They were never interested.
in the site. I found it very interesting though, the reaction I got from people with Trader Joe's. Now you mentioned Trader Joe's. Trader Joe's. Trader Joe's. I drive all the way to Cleveland for Trader Joe's. I'm like, what is this Trader Joe's? And I was like, people drive up to Cleveland for Trader Joe's. So it has to have, whatever it is, it needs to have some of that special, something extra to draw people in. And so I think that's what we need to be looking at. And you learn from your mistakes, you learn from the past, but you've always got to kind of keep your head forward and not get discouraged, because I know a lot of work has gone into this particular proposal here, and a lot of frustration in the room relative to how it is. We need to just change that dynamic and have more input here and honest dialogue and communication.